Welcome to the webinar, The Next Era of Industrials Innovation. My name is Ian Reinhardt, Associate Research Director here at Lux Research, and I will be moderating today's session. Presenting today is my colleague Yuansheng Yu, Senior Research Director at Lux Research. Throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. Time permitting, we will answer all the questions that we can. But if your question does not get answered, please do not hesitate to email it to questions@luxresearchinc.com and we will respond. If at any point you experience technical difficulties, such as a frozen screen, simply refresh your browser and check that the internet connection is strong. That fixes it 9 times out of 10. Great, so let's jump into the presentation. Yuansheng?
Thank you, Ian, for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here today to talk about the next era of industrials innovation. This webinar will be slightly different from what many of you may have become familiar with in terms of Lux webinars. This one is to really kick off and introduce you all to our new and improved industrials research and advisory service. It's quite a pivotal moment for us at Lux as we have reimagined the offering to really pinpoint those high impact innovation and R&D priorities for industrial conglomerates, industrial machinery and equipment manufacturers, as well as engineering, procurement, and construction companies. The fact is that the industrial sector has always been a mainstay. It's the backbone of the global economy, whether that's raw materials, equipment, technical expertise. They've had a hand in building and maintaining the world's infrastructure and supply chains. So where do we start for industrials innovation? Or should I say, where did we start? There are plenty of cautionary tales of industrial companies thriving and failing. So instead of starting there, let's just start where everything began. Going back through history and seeing all that the industrial sector has done that has had absolutely transformational impacts on our economy. In the 18th century, you had the steam engine that kicked off the Industrial Revolution. In the 19th century, the Bessemer process for steel production led to the massive build out of infrastructure. And in the 20th century, Ford's automated assembly line kick-started modern manufacturing. Even in the early 21st century, the industrial sector built the technologies and infrastructure for LNG trade, which completely changed the energy industry. But on the flip side, just as transformative companies can be, they also can fade into irrelevance or become obsolete. Things always seem stable and predictable until they're not, right? The creative destruction cycle, though, isn't as fast as, say, consumer products, so it's usually a pretty long, drawn-out, often painful process instead. So I had to dust off Scott Davis's book, Lessons from Titans, to find a few good examples, right? Now, to preface all of these examples, the inability or unwillingness to adapt to new technologies and innovate, that's just one of a very long list of issues that these companies had. Some ventured into completely unrelated sectors, had mismanaged financials, or needed to deal with labor issues. So it's not really an innovate or die type of story here for these companies. Many other things went wrong as well. You have Westinghouse Electric Corporation, considered one of the two-headed monsters with GE when it came to power generation, but the company didn't keep up with the changes in the energy market and technology advancements. Then you have International Harvester, once one of the most dominant agricultural machinery companies. It failed to keep up with changes in the agriculture sector. Now, they do still have a cult following, but you'll see a lot more of them at classic car shows rather than in the fields themselves. Reality now is that when you think of a farm tractor, the yellow and green of John Deere is what comes to mind, not them. Lastly, you have Bethlehem Steel, major contributor to the economic growth of the US, but failed to modernize its production technology while also dealing with increasing foreign competition as well. Now their abandoned factories are actually photo spots instead of, continuing to be a major pillar in the economy. So what's so different? Look, we could have given this presentation in 2000, 1980, and probably even before that. Industrial companies will continue to face the traditional pressures, right? Competing on costs, competing on performance, and having to do so rapidly. However, the landscape has shifted. Now they must also compete within the framework of this net zero imperative, right? Not just for their own operations, but also for their customers as well. Now, whether global net zero targets are ultimately met is a completely separate discussion, but the reality is that the world's major economies are no longer just making pledges. They are enacting these targets into policies and laws, which fundamentally reshapes the environment in which the industrial sector operates. So those that align their innovation efforts with this shift and tap into those emerging opportunities will emerge as examples on the first slide I showed, right? Those that don't may end up on the second slide I showed, probably a decade from now. So that's why we're here today, to uncover those underlying themes and technologies that are driving the innovation priorities in the industrial sector. First, how do we actually develop these new client priorities and identify these technologies? Second, what do these priorities even mean to innovation leaders such as yourself? Why is it critical? What can you do to act on them? Plus, we'll share some of the questions the industry is looking to answer and also highlight some of this innovation in action, so to speak. And lastly, where do you start if you haven't started? And if you have, how can you accelerate it? So first up, unbiased, customer-centric. One of the most important elements in our revamp of the industrial service was ensuring that we took an outside-in approach, that we were grounded in industry trends based on comprehensive data sources, and most importantly, aligned to the actual needs and strategic visions the leaders in the sector have. So first, the data. We started with 74 annual reports from the world's largest industrial companies. This provided us with a nice top-down sort of organizational level strategy. But then we combined that with anonymized and aggregated data of 8,500 questions asked and 1,000 innovation initiatives shared by innovation executives. Now, this is Lux's proprietary data. This is insights you can't glean from annual reports or press releases, but instead provide an inside look at some of the most pressing core innovation priorities that executives have across the industry. So from the data, we then applied natural language processing and topic modeling. We used advanced NLP techniques to uncover recurring themes, patterns, and emerging areas of focus specific to innovation from these data sources. This actually gave us a very robust understanding of what companies are focusing on and enabled us to build a really data-driven foundation for our eventual Lux client priorities. But at the end of the day, data is only half the picture. We do need a human touch, right? Humans buy products, humans make decisions. Innovation is a human ecosystem. So we conducted 30 interviews to extract top-level interpretations of those themes and vet some of our initial findings. These interviews provided a very critical human-centric perspective from those at the forefront of innovation. So we then took those interviews to develop 5 new client priorities and uncovered 65 technology topics of strategic relevance. And from that is where we have the creation of the new Lux client priorities for industrials innovation leaders: decarbonizing operations, resource security and circularity, next-gen materials and manufacturing, enabling the energy transition, and retooling for new market opportunities. Of course, policy and regulation remains a consistent and important 6th priority. That's not going to go anywhere. And we'll dive into each of these individually later in this presentation. But before that, I wanted to share some notable trends and analysis that we saw. One, it should come as no surprise, but 90% of the companies we analyzed clearly outlined decarbonizing operations as an innovation priority. 69% are innovating to position themselves as key enablers of the global energy transition, and 60% are innovating their products and offerings for new market opportunities. So as we dive a little deeper into the analysis, there's actually distinct differences in the innovation priorities across these sub-industries that I mentioned earlier: industrial conglomerates, machinery and equipment manufacturers, engineering construction firms. It really highlights how the diverse players within the sector tackle innovation priorities and opportunities. One, decarbonizing operation consistently ranks among the top priorities across all the sub-industries. For industrial conglomerates that often have some of these high-emitting assets, they're focused on integrating emissions-reducing technologies as a path forward. Mitsui & Co. Is looking to incorporate hydrogen and CCUS into some of its high-emitting assets, such as the steel plants. Retooling for new market opportunities, that's really at the core of machinery and equipment manufacturers' innovation priorities, as companies need to proactively align to the evolving needs of their customers. Woodward highlights not only for the needs of their customers today, but also the technologies and solutions for tomorrow. And then you have enabling the energy transition, the most prominent priority for engineering construction companies, not surprisingly, who are looking to position themselves as the key suppliers of energy transition infrastructure. Arcadis is targeting this space as a key pillar for their growth strategy and has outlined that as a clear path forward for them. But regionally, the variations are actually equally pronounced, not only reflecting the current market environments in each respective region, but also a good view for benchmarking, right, against regional peers for possible competitive advantages on certain technology areas and even market entry opportunities. In the Americas, there's a heightened focus on reshoring manufacturing, and that's really driving focus on next gen materials and manufacturing, where automation and advanced manufacturing processes can help bridge the gap left over from decades of offshoring manufacturing. Parker Hannifin has in house innovation and engineering management tools to ensure that they continue to reduce costs and simplify their operations. And despite the conversations we had with clients over the last year or so, surprisingly, resource security and circularity is not as prominent as an innovation priority as we thought it would be. However, it is more pronounced in APAC and EMEA, as of course, resource security has elevated to a national security concern in a lot of the countries in this region. Mitsubishi Corporation highlighted it as a vital priority as they are actually facing increasing difficulty in developing critical minerals projects due to political instability. And then lastly, decarbonizing operations, it's core to all regions, with EMEA really leading efforts. But EMEA companies are also looking to parlay their domestic decarbonization into enabling the energy transition for others as well. Atlas Copco views electric vehicles, energy storage, and renewable energy as key markets for growth for their industrial tools and equipment. So now let's dive into each of these 5 new client priorities. For each priority, we'll first outline why it's critical, right? And how should innovation leaders such as yourself act on them. Plus, we'll pull from those 8,500 innovation questions mentioned earlier to distill some questions the industry is looking to answer and what key technologies are fundamental to each of these priorities. And of course, to round it out, we'll also take a look at some of these innovation in action, highlighting how an industrials company is adopting or even developing a technology to address their needs. First, decarbonizing operations. I think it goes without saying, decarbonizing is challenging. Combined with the long lifetimes of industrial assets and mounting regulatory pressures, integration of decarbonization strategies for both current operations as well as future investments is critical. The other alternative is decommissioning, and that is just too economically and financially painful. But this will take a phased approach. Retrofitting existing assets with proven low carbon technologies will help today, while laying some of the groundwork for investments in more transformational and long term technologies. Acting now on the latter in developing and piloting these technologies will provide deeper technical, operational, and economic insights as these solutions approach commercial viability. But just to be clear, those who operate in countries without existing regulations need to be practical, right? Overextending yourself before market and regulatory forces require the bold actions may actually backfire. So as you think about where your organization is in its decarbonization roadmap, what are some of the emerging technologies and strategies being explored by others in the space? One area gaining a lot more attention now is heat. What are the promising solutions being developed to address the need for high temperature processes, especially in a lot of the sectors you play in? ArcelorMittal is looking at all its possible options. For its Torero plant in Belgium, it's turning to biocoal as a solution, as an input. And earlier this year, it received environmental approval for its €1 billion Spain project for both direct reduced iron as well as a hybrid electric arc furnace. This is a good example of leveraging what Lux calls makeshift solutions, biocoal, and retrofit solutions, direct reduced iron and electric arc furnaces. But it also highlights the very large economic commitment that even these technologies require. Moving on to resource security and circularity, it's becoming a critical business threat. I think we all are very aware of the geopolitical tensions, trade restrictions, all at the same time while global demand for products continue to increase. So access to these critical minerals and raw materials is increasingly at risk. Innovative solutions will play a vital role in reducing dependence on these finite resources and help strengthen resilience and, of course, ensure operational stability. Now, a comprehensive resource management plan is mandatory, but this just doesn't mean securing supply agreements. It also means recycling waste streams to recover valuable resources and also explore untapped sources of raw materials. building self-reliance by onshoring material supply is really only possible for those who have the luxury to do so. But we all know necessity is the mother of invention. So finding alternative feedstocks to produce the same equivalent product will be equally important. But instead of thinking about extracting more raw materials, how can you leverage your own waste streams to recover valuable materials? Or if you're already part of something like the battery value chain, what innovations are available to recover high quality inputs? On this latter example, Glencore is leveraging both circularity as a strategy to improve its resource security. In 2022, Glencore partnered with Lithium Cycle, a lithium ion battery recycling company. And although Lithium Cycle has faced some challenges, Glencore sort of doubled down on its partnership earlier this year with the 75 million USD investment, as it sees battery recycling as a key part of its resource strategy for its metal trading and refining businesses. Now, a slight pivot in terms of the innovation priorities. The first two were pretty much focused on process innovation, right? What goes in, what comes out. But of course, industrial companies also sell various products as well. So if I look back at the Bethlehem Steel example, the industrial sector is facing intensifying global competition and more customer demands. The former was part of the reason of Bethlehem's downfall. And the fact is that for every product your organization makes, there is very likely a lower cost alternative available out there. Now, is it better than yours? Probably not. And that's going to be the key in differentiating yourself. But today, the speed in which technological advancements are being made is a major difference. Those slower in R&D will be the ones that get passed up by those that embrace cutting edge materials and technologies into their specialized products. You'll need to find the right sandboxes, so to speak, to trial emerging technologies and validate these new solutions within your operations, and then determine whether to build in-house capabilities or leverage external partnerships. A clear build versus buy strategy here is essential. Yes, we've seen industrial companies stretch too far out of their core with misguided partnerships and acquisitions. But with a focus on sort of the longer term customer needs, external collaborations will be key in advancing a lot of these cutting edge developments. And the thing with the sandbox is there's a lot you can really play with, right? Something more near term. And one of the most asked questions by our clients in the past year is about how thermal management materials will evolve, especially for data centers, as well as things like electric vehicles. And for the more forward thinking, have you evaluated quantum technologies and their potential in your R&D roadmaps? An example of the latter comes from Honeywell. In 2021, they merged their Honeywell Quantum Solutions business with Cambridge Quantum to form Quantum. Through this, Honeywell has actually been integrating quantum sensors and encryption into their industrial monitoring systems, especially for industries like oil and gas, aerospace, and utilities that are requiring or demanding higher precision, sensitivity, and response times. Now on to enabling the energy transition. I think it's all clear to everyone who's in the audience today, the transition to a low carbon energy system is underway, and the industrial sector is uniquely positioned to grow in tandem as providers of the solutions and infrastructure energy company needs today, as well as key components and technical expertise for energy companies of the future. As mentioned at the beginning, the global LNG industry we have today was built on that infrastructure and expertise that industrial players possess. But it's not as straightforward as just an investment in R&D to develop the specialized equipment and components that these emerging technologies need. Energy today is relatively straightforward, right? Oil, natural gas, and in some places still coal. But the energy transition prevents a wide range of technologies and a wide range of energy sources. So carefully crafting a technology roadmap that's not only targeting high growth opportunities, but also keeping a realistic eye on commercialization timelines, if commercialization ever happens, is going to be just as important. One technology some are pushing to commercialize is small modular nuclear reactors. Can industrial companies play a role in the future of nuclear? Or what's the potential transition of power generation from natural gas and coal to possibly hydrogen or ammonia blending, respectively? Great example of being involved in the energy transition without actually really being involved in the energy transition is a recent announcement from Schneider Electric earlier this year. They signed a MOU with Terrestrial Energy, a molten salt reactor developer, to supply its suite of energy management and automation solutions. I think it's safe to say Schneider Electric has no interest in becoming a nuclear energy provider themselves, but this highlights how industrial companies can still provide tools in supporting the development and scaling of these technologies. And for the last priority, retooling for new market opportunities. Um, this one's interesting, and this one definitely stood out quite a bit, and I'll kind of dive a little bit into why. Um, Ultimately, as B2B companies, industrials are influenced by shifts their customers face down the value chain, particularly in sectors serving end consumers. So, proactively responding to these shifts is critical to developing differentiated solutions that can capitalize on these growth opportunities. But as we've all seen, swift pivots are not easy for companies like those in the sector. So, understanding how today's innovation will transform equipment needs in your value chain is the way to stay relevant. Like I mentioned, this priority struck a chord during our interviews. Many innovation executives we spoke to recognize that the customer relationships that they have are not entirely conducive to seeing past the horizon, as they mostly respond to product requests and enhancements typically delivered within the year or even the next quarter. So it's the relationship with the executives tasked with strategy and innovation that's going to provide that visibility into the long term, into those long-term customer strategies, so that you and your own R&D roadmaps are well positioned to develop those retooled offerings alongside your customer's entire innovation journey, not just to their day-to-day operations. So this priority really captures just how many different industries the industrial sectors touches. On one hand, there's growing interest in understanding how to support the scaling of biomanufacturing processes, while some are looking for a better understanding of just how disruptive sustainable aviation fuel and even electric aviation can be to the aerospace industry. Similar to sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable marine fuels is another market where changes can have significant impacts on the infrastructure and equipment. Instead of picking a winner for sustainable marine fuels, Wärtsilä instead has developed two engine platforms that can operate on LNG or diesel today, but it's compatible with ammonia and methanol as well in the future. This highlights how Wärtsilä retooled its offering with flexibility in mind, right? Enabling it to take in new market opportunities when or if mainstream adoption of either ammonia or methanol occurs without sacrificing the short-term needs of its customers as well as its own business. So we've gotten to the core of what the industrial sector is prioritizing for innovation, because while business as usual provides a very low risk, low reward path to maintaining the status quo with existing customers in existing markets, there is a pressure to innovate and bring about breakthrough innovations sort of for the long term. We've highlighted a few of those most relevant technologies and challenges that innovation leaders are looking to address, as well as outlined various strategies that you all should take to tackle each of these priorities. So it's now time to act, right? Where do you start? Or better yet, you've started already. How can you accelerate your initiatives? Well, one, we've discussed today the importance of maintaining a dynamic and agile technology portfolio, right? The key here is being flexible enough to respond to both established trends and emerging opportunities. This means building a suite of technologies that can evolve as market demands shift become more clear. So cross-functional collaboration is critical here. It ensures that projects across business units complement one another rather than conflict. You'll actually be surprised at how often we encounter innovation teams that are unaware of each other's efforts when combining them could actually significantly accelerate progress. On the right, though, is an example of how to kind of get that bird's eye view. We have the Lux Decarbonization Radar, developed by my colleague Renio, who leads our coverage of industrial decarbonization. This framework is designed specifically to tackle the challenges of integrating decarbonization technologies at scale in industrial facilities. It really helps innovation leaders explore all the available options and technologies, assess sort of the long-term risks and benefits, and identify potential conflicts where competing technologies might clash. So having this broader view allows decision makers to make more informed choices on what the best path forward is. Second, benchmarking and finding opportunities. Benchmarking is common practice for understanding the innovation priorities of industry peers, but it's not enough to stop there, right? You need to dig a little deeper, examine the key technologies that are being explored, and even identify the opportunities where you can differentiate yourself. This might mean developing products or technologies that are flying under the radar of your competitors. my colleague Akshay, who leads our coverage of topics in next generation materials and manufacturing, developed the Lux New Opportunity Framework, which outlines potential opportunities industrial companies can pursue in either existing or emerging value chains. Right? Existing value chains are well established, while new ones are riskier but often offer greater long-term rewards, driven by new technologies or shifting customer preferences. The framework also helps with product strategy. Will you continue with existing refined products or develop new ones that open the door to entirely new markets? It's this combination of value chains and products that create sort of four archetypes: the improver, the evolver, the explorer, and the visionary. Based on today's discussion and the analysis we conducted, it seems like the industrial sector aspires to be the visionary archetype, just as it has been for over the last 3 centuries. So where do you think your organization stands? And more importantly, where do your competitors stand? And lastly here, innovation in the industrial sector will increasingly require collaboration. Technology development alone won't solve the complex challenges ahead. This collaboration, though, isn't just internal. It involves orchestrating engagements across business units and partnering with stakeholders throughout the value chain, including your competitors. Participating in consortiums and innovation hubs allow companies to pool expertise and share risk. And this is something we've emphasized heavily for the last several years, especially with issues like decarbonization and things like the hydrogen economy. Europe has set a strong example with its hydrogen hubs, which brought together industries and even competitors under one consortium. And we're starting to see a similar shift in the US with the US DOE's hydrogen hubs, which represent really a paradigm shift. US companies have been a bit less inclined to collaborate with competitors or even socialize at the same conference. So seeing this unfold is a major step. But of course, $7 billion USD really helps the cause there. So collaboration on infrastructure is becoming the standard. The key is to collaborate on the infrastructure, but compete on the product. That's where differentiation will happen. That's where you can really carve out your market leadership position. So with that, we want to thank you all for joining today's webinar as we unveiled our newly revamped Industrials Research and Advisory Service. We hope today's webinar shed some insights into the thinking of innovation leaders across the world's largest industrial companies, confirmed some of your strategies, and hopefully also inspired a few new ideas. Thank you all again, and we'll now take a few questions from the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ancheng. We'll now be taking questions that the audience has. As I said, you can type those into the questions box. If we don't get to your question on this call, someone from Lux will follow up with you after the webinar. So I think we got time, for at least 2 or 3 questions. I'm going to start with one of my own while the others roll in from the audience. Would you say it's more important to decarbonize your own production or to enable other companies to decarbonize?
Yeah, absolutely. Both are definitely critical. And honestly, the answer really depends on sort of the market position of your company, right? I think as we outlined today, decarbonizing your own operations is important. It ensures sort of operational resilience, compliance with regulations, and lets you keep those expensive assets up and running for as long as you originally planned to. But to your point, enabling others to decarbonize really can unlock some significant growth opportunities, right? We can almost consider it another gold rush. And during the gold rush, it wasn't necessarily the miners who became the wealthiest. It was actually those that supplied the services, tools, infrastructures, and becoming a common phrase that's being said lately is when there's a gold rush, sell shovels. Probably the most iconic example of the gold rush is Levi's jeans, but there's several other more, right? Wells Fargo offered financial and delivery services to miners. Union Pacific basically built the railroads that opened up the West to the rest of the country. But I'm sure in their spare time, a few employees probably panned for gold for fun, but they basically sold shovels during this period and are now one of the largest companies still within their respective sectors.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Then let's turn to a couple from the audience. Here's one. Is the situation different for industrial companies in Asia where governments are not promoting sustainability as forcefully?
Yeah, I think as kind of the figure really showed, I think comparatively it is different from from Europe and the US, right? But there are advantages to this for companies in APAC. You can say that they're actually very well positioned to be fast followers for decarbonization, adapting those technologies that end up commercially proven in those other regions as the regulatory environment becomes a little bit more mature. On the flip side, though, while industrial companies in APAC may not be under as much pressure to decarbonize their own operations, they are very keen on helping companies from the rest of the world. We didn't highlight this specifically in the presentation earlier, but in the regional breakdown of priorities, enabling the energy transition is actually the highest in APAC across the regions. Especially several of the Japanese industrial conglomerates that were part of our analysis, really looking to position themselves to serve the technology needs of their global customers.
Yeah, I could see that. Okay, then looking at the time, let's do just one more of these questions. Okay, here's one that's drilling into some of the data that you presented earlier. The priority for next generation materials and manufacturing had the lowest concentration at 42% of companies, or I guess you could say like the lowest resonance. Is that a sign that industrial companies are not investing in fundamental R&D?
Yeah, no, that is a great question, and it definitely stood out to us as well when we were conducting the analysis and the interviews. It's certainly not a sign that industrial companies are neglecting or kind of downplaying fundamental R&D. In fact, industrial companies, especially machinery and equipment manufacturers, on average spend 12 to 15% of their revenue on R&D, which is actually much higher than, say, chemicals, oil and gas, and definitely utilities. So it's more so about what the fundamental R&D is happening on, right? I think industrial companies, for their R&D, they really need to prioritize those near-term innovations over sort of what would require much longer development timelines. And this is where a lot of the next generation materials and manufacturing technologies that we're looking at would fit. It's not to say it's not important, but it does highlight sort of the different innovation cycle the sector typically runs on, right? One that's really focused on addressing the customer problems, like of today by next week, versus sort of finding this next game-changing or groundbreaking technology that may not be commercially viable for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, great. Well, I see we're at time now, so we'll just leave it with those three. And thank you very much for the stimulating session, for addressing those questions. And we look forward to seeing you at Lux webinars in the future. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.